Welcome, everyone, to the Culinary Now podcast. My name is Matt Britt.
And I'm Jamie Schick.
And today on the pod, we are joined by Chef Rick Allaire. Rick Allaire is the chef at Metacom Kitchen in Warren, Rhode Island. Chef, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
We're so excited to chat with you today. I think just to start off, could you just give everyone a quick, brief little bio of where you've been and where you're at now?
All right. Well, going back to the beginning of Metacom Kitchen, I found the space in 2014 and then did about a 6-month renovation and then operated it for about 8 or so years. At that point, I had an opportunity to work with some business partners who I had done a project with like a couple of years prior. It was a restaurant called Providence Coal-Fired Pizza. And they were doing a restaurant, like a consultation in Newport. So I was like, oh, I'll do something different. So I closed Metacom and went and worked on that for a bit. Prior to that, I had worked in Boston and I worked in Newport a little bit in Providence. So I've been around for a while.
You certainly have. And I want to go back a little bit because you mentioned, somewhere in the past you worked in Boston. And I think I'd like to just dive in a little bit because I know the place you worked in Boston, or one of the places you worked in Boston, is one of my favorite restaurants ever at Radius. Can you talk a little bit about how that restaurant inspired you to sort of take the leap to open Metacom the first time and just what that culture was and how it really fostered your philosophy as a chef?
Yeah, Radius was like, I think every chef looks back at their favorite job when they were like a line cook. And Radius was definitely that for me. It was a new experience. It was a big kitchen. The chef, Michael Schlau, he had just won the James Beard Award, Best Chef Northeast, when I got there like a couple months after he had won it. So there was just like an energy to the place, I mean, it was very strict. It was kind of old school, I guess, in terms of what the expectations were every day. But it was a great experience, and I feel like it really sort of set the bar for how I wanted to eventually run a place. It was just a great time. The best, everyone around, all the cooks around me made me better. So that's the kind of environment you want to be in as a young cook, is to not be the best one in the kitchen. So you're always looking around, learning new things, and so it was an incredible experience.
Oh, for sure. And I love that you have that Boston connection because that's where the bulk of my career was, in Boston. And I actually staged at Radius for a pastry position way back in the early 2000s. And I didn't end up getting it, but I found a restaurant for me that I felt the same. I loved the culture that it created. I loved that I was learning constantly from all these different people. And I'm curious how you kind of took that experience and have applied it into what you're doing at Metacom now with your staff.
Well, it's just, the thing that carried over from Radius, and that was a really long time ago now, was just the idea that, the entire kitchen is like your station. Like everything is, you maintain like everything, not just your own work area. Right. So everyone is really working collectively to make it a good work environment. And that was really emphasized there. Like everything was your responsibility. If there was something on the floor, regardless where it was, it's your job to pick it up. Mm-hmm. So when everyone is in that same frame of mind, it just makes it a much better work environment, rather than someone just like limiting what their responsibilities are to their immediate area. And then everything else is like, well, that's not my job. So it was that kind of approach that I thought is good to implement in your own place, in your own business, or your own kitchen, in a place that you're managing. It's just a good way of looking at it. I thought Michael Schlau was a great leader. He really is.
Oh yes, I've heard great things as well. And now that you have your own kitchen, you're running your own menus. What do you think influenced your current style? Was it these early experiences? Was it traveling, books? What do you think kind of helped to shape the style of food that you're doing today?
I think it was a lot of all of those things. Like whenever I travel, it's funny. One of my guests just asked me last night, when I travel if food is the main focus, and it's actually really not. It's always a part of it, but it's not really. It's more about experiencing something new, and sometimes it has to do with food, and sometimes it doesn't. Like, sometimes it's more like something you might have read about, World War II history, and then you're in Germany and you're looking at the Brandenburg Gate, and then other times, we went to a salt mine in Austria, and that made me think about some of the things that, some of the different things you do with salt, so, uh, so it's really a combination of things. It's not just limited to one area.
That's
So
cool.
it's funny you mentioned that when you travel, it's not always about food, but I feel like as chefs, you always kind of stumble backwards into food,
Yeah.
and you always end up, looking for that place to eat, or you end up trying, as you mentioned with the salt mine, connecting salt to sort of your travel like itinerary, and you start thinking about it in terms of food. How does that connection process work in your own restaurant? Like when you plan menus, are you trying to connect guests to a story, or are you trying to connect them to an ingredient? Like how is your philosophy really, get more granular? Like what is your approach when it comes to creating a dish?
Well, I mean, like at Metacom on Mondays, we're always coming up with like 8 to 9 new dishes a week to run on Mondays. So it generally starts with an ingredient, and so like last week it was like rabbit loins, for example, and I had like a surplus of rabbit loins. So, you're curing them and then working them into a dish. And then, we have more hanging. So we're going to work those into another dish. So it generally starts with one ingredient, and then it sort of develops from there over the course of like 5 to 6 days. Because the process for Monday starts on Tuesday, and then it goes over the course of the week. And then it just sort of, a lot of them just sort of work themselves out through like Saturday, Sunday, and then Monday they they become what they're going to become.
And that must be super inspiring for your team because normally in a restaurant, I mean the art of repetition is crucial because that's how you improve and that's how you create efficiencies and get better at your job. But having a culture that is surrounded about let's look at this ingredient that we have a lot of and let's create something really cool 5 days from now. I mean, the team must really buy into that, right?
They do, and not just the kitchen. I think the front of the house, like they're involved with it too. Not so much in the development of it, but in how they're gonna like express it to the guest. So I feel like in many ways Monday keeps the whole staff on their toes because it's actually the busiest night of the week, strangely,
That's awesome.
and and it's and every Monday we're coming up with it's like a whole new thing going on. So, but they're fun, but they're challenging at the same time. But I think it being challenging is one of the is what makes it unique and what makes it special is the fact that it's always something that you're always sort of pursuing, and trying to get your head around every week. And the entire staff is involved in it too, which is great.
Yeah, that's actually what I was thinking is it's so cool that they get to be a part of the process. They get to see it and kind of see how you're working through it and then the end result. And I think that is so rewarding.
Yeah, and so every week's different, and some weeks it's seamless, and other weeks it's clunky, and so we're always, and unfortunately we usually find out if it's seamless or it's clunky in the middle of service, because it's all on the menu, and it's generally very busy. But that's just the nature of it. But more importantly, I think beyond us, I feel like the guests are really just like entertained by it, and I think that's part of it. It's like it's affordable, it's fun, it's relaxed, it's entertaining. So all of those things I think make it unique. And the restaurant, and that's a thing that restaurants known for.
Yeah. So
So
I want to dive in a little bit to just kind of the location of where you are, because as someone who lives in Massachusetts, I feel like we always kind of look down at Rhode Island. We're like, oh, it's such a small state. And, but there's something really special about Rhode Island and more importantly, special about like Warren, because you mentioned that, Monday is the busiest day of the week. Like that is very rare. I feel like 99% of restaurants, their busy days happen to be on the weekends when people don't have to go to work the next day.
Right.
But can you talk a little bit about the magic of your location and why Warren, let alone your menu and your restaurant, why Warren really does rally around food?
That's a good question. Back when we opened, what I'm told is there weren't a lot of restaurants in Warren, or they had been around for a very long time, and they were more like family restaurants, kind of like very casual places. And in a short period of time, like Chomp, the burger place, opened, and then Joe Simone opened a restaurant, Eli Dunn opened a restaurant, and then we opened a restaurant, and this all happened within like 7 months to a year. So in a short period of time, there was all these new options in Warren. So I think that might have like got it going. And since there have been more, like Bywater was here, and they did a lot of great things. Revival's here. Jom's just expanded. So there's a lot going on for such a really tiny town.
Yeah.
And it's nice. Like I just like the feel of it. I don't live here, but I feel like I do because I own property here, So it's great. It's just a really great place to operate a business. And on speaking of which, like the town is great to work with in terms of licensing and in terms of just getting things like this past summer, I was like putting a liquor license back in place and, just working with like the building inspector, and everyone just like wants to be helpful, and it's not like that in every town.
True. I love that. That's so important when you have a business, and especially a restaurant, where you can get hung up on a lot of things, like a lot of bureaucracy. So I love that it feels supportive, and because you do spend a lot of time there, it's nice that you do enjoy the town.
Yeah. I mean, it's like I don't see why they wouldn't want to make it easy for a business to do well. It's in everybody's interest for that to happen. And that's what they do here. And I've never had any complaints about this town in terms of operationally how we run the business and what their expectations are. And they just make all the bureaucracy relatively easy.
Oh, that's lovely. Yeah. Now I want to talk for a minute. And I know that being a restaurant owner, this can be a little bit of a sore subject, but I know that in spring of 2024, you did announce that you were closing your restaurant. And can you talk a little bit about the decision that came behind that, and then the decision to where you are now to reopen it, and maybe the lessons learned in between?
Yeah, well, I think it goes back to the fact that I had never worked in one place for that long of a period of time. Like up until Metacom, I had never worked in the same space for more than 3 years. So I'd always had it in my mind that, even though I own it, I feel like I'll probably do it for like 7 or 8 years and then do something else. And I felt that way before I even opened it in 2014. So when in like 23, 24, I'm like, I think it's time just to do something else. And then my partners approached me about doing something. So I'm like, yeah, I think this chapter is over, and I think it's time just to do something else. And so, the decision was made, and I did it. And then I think within 4 or 5 months, I just felt like I just had a different feeling about the decision, and I'm just being very honest about it. Like I missed, like I definitely missed like the guests. Almost all of my staff has come back, and I missed them awesome. Too. And it was just this, I just felt like I broke something up that didn't really need to be broken up. So, but I had a commitment in Newport, and I did 2 summers in Newport, and we made the decision to start Metacom up again last spring. And so I spent the summer, the time that I could, coming back and working on the licensing and doing some renovations. And it really allowed me to take another look at the space and to really analyze what were the things that I was dissatisfied with that led me to that decision. So some of those things were like operational, like, the payroll company I didn't like, and I just wanted to use a different bank, and we just wanted a different merchant services company. And so one of the things I really learned doing the project in Newport was that operationally they had things much more organized than I did when I ran Metacom the first time. And I think it exposed the areas that I was lacking as an operator. So I look at that as a really good learning experience, because the people that I was with working with in Newport were really operationally were very organized people. So it was a humbling experience, but it was a good experience to be able to take some of those things and reorganize my own place. For example, I have one company now for merchant services, POS, reservations, and payroll. So now all of those things are at one place. So it just makes it much, much easier. Before, those were 4 different accounts and 4 different businesses that would do those things. So it was those kinds of things that I just feel like the restaurant is much more set up for success than it was the first time. Even though it was successful the first time, operationally, it's much easier to do.
That is such a great response. And I love how, again, that break led you to see kind of the gaps in your game. And albeit few, I mean, there are clearly some sort of technological things that had changed from 2014 to 2024, and being able to implement those is massive. I'm going to bring this back a little bit to sort of kind of what Jaime and I do, which is teach, because we have this philosophical question that students ask all the time. And it's, how long should you stay at a restaurant? And it sounds like when you were coming up in your career, you kind of used the 3-year mark as like the top. And I think leaving is good because it exposes you, as you learn, to new things. But is there a breaking point? Like, as an employer, like, what would you say to students where, like, what's the sweet spot? Like, how long should you stay at a place before moving on to the next venture? Or is that an unanswerable question?
It really depends on what the place is. If the place is like, if you're a cook and you're working for a chef who never changes the menu, and then there's nothing different or going on, and you can kind of absorb everything in a year is probably good, even if it's a really good place. But if there is always something happening and always new challenges and all these different tiers that you can work your way up, it could be a lot longer. So it really depends. Mine was about 2 to 3 years prior to Metacom. And I think part of why the Monday night thing just came out of like, let's change the menu every week. Let's do something new every week. Partly to challenge myself, but also to make it new for the staff, so they're learning new things.
It's a retention tool. I mean, I
think it is. I think it is. Like, one of my cooks, he's going to start working on Mondays, and I'm like, make a list of ingredients that you have never worked with before, and let me know what they are, and we'll bring them in, and we'll start using them. And so he'll see new things. Maybe if it's something I haven't seen, maybe I'll learn new things. And it just inspires everyone just to research more and just to try to see something else that you haven't done before.
I love that you said that, because as Matt said, we both teach. And one of the things I find in my classes is I'm constantly learning from my students. So even though I may be teaching, this is like our 10th year teaching now, and I've been a little bit removed from the industry because of that. I know it makes us sound old, but I'm constantly learning from my students. They're constantly having these great ideas, these new techniques that they want to try or they want to research. And I feel like it keeps me in with what is happening now. And I love that there's that constant learning loop, and you're never feeling stagnant. And the fact that your menu's changing, same thing, right? Your guests aren't getting bored, your cooks aren't getting bored. And I think that's the magic. Like you said, I think that's the secret.
Yeah, I agree. It can be very easy, especially when you're operating a business, for it just to become like a bit of a hamster wheel, where you're just doing the same thing over and over again. And that's part of what you need to do to be consistent. To your point earlier, it's like there needs to be consistency, but within that consistency, I think if you can blend creativity and trying to be somewhat spontaneous at times, and to be open to new ideas and new techniques. I think that's what allows, it's what allows me as the person leading the kitchen to expose the cooks to new things too, because there's a limit to what I know, and there's so much more that I can learn. So there's no, I don't think there's any peak, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think you also have to have the right attitude to be open to learning and not thinking that we know everything, and just being willing to make mistakes or not know the answer or have things go wrong and learn from it. So I think it's also in your personality, our personality, the person, because I think that there are some chefs out there who wouldn't have that same outlook, that same view.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, I mean, and it goes back a little bit to something that was mentioned earlier, which is like it's okay to be the worst person in the room because you're in the room, right? I mean, you're still there to learn, and like that approach as a cook is something I try and instill in students. Is like, hey, like it, if you get invited to the party, you're at the party. Like now it's time to learn.
Yeah,
and if you're at the top of that, your role flips a little bit. And now you have to be the person who's not like, I know everything, but which is great. We talk a lot about teaching. We talk a lot about culture on this podcast, but I want to flip the script a little bit, talk a little bit about food, because at our core, we're all chefs. Like what is really inspiring you right now? Like what ingredients are you, I mean, fall in New England is the best, but like what ingredients are you working with now that you think really reflect where food is heading and where Metacom's philosophy is thriving?
Well, I mean, there are certain kinds of ingredients that are always available. Like one thing we use quite a bit at Metacom is koji, and I think it just transforms things so much. It actually can make great ingredients even better. I don't know if you. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing what that ingredient can do, but I mean, another thing that we use at Metacom a lot is ducks. It's like a main thing that we sell here, and we use, we go through, I don't know, 18 to 24 ducks a week sometimes, So, but it's not just, because we get the ducks in whole. Almost all of the sauces that are meat based are based on duck, because we just generate duck wings and duck necks and livers and hearts and all kinds of stuff. So it finds itself into almost all corners of the menu, just as a tool that we need to utilize.
I love that.
Now let's just real quick, let's just talk about desserts on the menu if we're going to be here in the food world.
Sure.
What's like a dessert you're real excited about that's on the menu right now?
Well, I mean, it's funny you bring up desserts, because my Paco Jet's getting shipped back right now. So,
oh no, that's actually the worst.
So yeah, I know. It's very expensive to fix.
Yes.
It's like, I tell people I'd rather bring my car to the mechanic than send the Paco Jet out to get fixed. But anyway,
true.
It's such a great tool that being able to just make all kinds of like frozen, mainly ice creams, but frozen desserts with a Paco Jet. It's pretty amazing. But like pastry is not my background, but no, we've been doing, there's not a ton of baking that happens here, but it's a lot of like, mousses and foams and like I said, ice creams. Mm-hmm. And so we made a parsnip and pecan panna cotta.
Yum.
For Monday, and parsnips are amazing. I think parsnips are better in sweet preparations than savory preparations.
Agree.
I love them.
It's oddly different as a root vegetable.
Love it.
So, chef, and I know Jaime will probably ask this question too, but like, where are you on like sweet and salty, sweet and savory together? Because I know Jaime loves that, and I feel like, as you said, your background isn't in pastry. I think that's a natural place that we gravitate towards, is like, putting sweet and salty, putting sweet and savory together as a way to sort of shine in the dessert world.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think sometimes, like when it comes to desserts and pastry in general, I back off on like the amount of sweetness, and I think I can tend to go a little bit more savory. Maybe it's just my lack of training. Maybe I have a tendency to back off from like sweet food in general. But yeah, generally that's where it lies.
Mm. I
Jamie,
think I like that. Yeah.
Jamie,
Yes.
what is like your go-to, like if you had to go out there on a limb and say like this is a really funky, like chef, you mentioned koji earlier. I think that obviously elevates that level of like fermentation kind of like flavor. Like what is the go-to ice cream you think would really embody sweet and savory today if you had to do one?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, um, some of my favorites have actually been a black truffle ice cream. Um,
Interesting.
yeah, that's some of my favorites. We did duck fat ice cream once. I've had a duck confit and cherry ice cream that I really enjoyed when I was in New York. So, I mean, I'll try anything once
Yeah.
if it's not too weird. Like I'm not gonna go for like full on raw garlic ice cream, but it's a little too pungent for me. But I'll try most things once.
I think the idea of savory ice creams is really interesting.
Yeah.
Like
I
Yeah. Oh,
agree.
yeah. Using it in like a salad or in a savory course. I've seen that before.
yeah, what one of my cooks a couple of years ago, he made a peanut ice cream and it ended up tasting exactly like pad thai, and
Wow.
it was better as like a course like in the middle of a menu than at the end, just because it was so savory and interesting.
I love
I
that.
love that.
And Jamie, I know you're jumping off the call because you got a million things going on, but I appreciate your dessert input because it's invaluable. But I love that duck and ice cream. I mean, who knows? Like it goes right to what you're talking about, chef. Is like,
Yep.
I like those flavors too because I think that this is something that we see a lot of students come to us with. Maybe not in their first year, but obviously as they kind of get more experience, is they love to play with koji. They love to play, and they realize how great and versatile duck is.
Yeah.
Um, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about fish. Me and you did a fish event pre-COVID, and where
Yeah.
we were really trying to celebrate sort of underutilized species. Where are you with Rhode Island and fish, and how and what are you doing to kind of bring that to the forefront?
So we're pretty fortunate because I've know some people who are avid fishermen, and they can be a great connection for me. And I mean, right now, what we're seeing, as you know, is like seasonally, like the tog are coming right now,
Mhm.
black sea bass, and right now that's pretty much what they're bringing. But fish has always played a pretty important part on the menu at Metacom, and so there's always like at least a handful. But I try to always have something different, and if I can't get something from them, I use Foley fish in Bedford, and they'll have like tilefish or monkfish, or I mean, I even use like the frozen hamachi fillets that you can get that can be pretty amazing quality too. So it's a combination of local, but we can't have local fish year round, unfortunately here. So
But I think that that's an important thing. I feel like you embody this, and maybe you can talk a little bit about it. Is like how does restraint play a role in your cooking? Because if you can't get something, like how do you respond to that as a chef?
oh, that's a good question. Um, so I mean, if I can't get something that's good quality, we just don't have it, And so I think there's something to be said for not trying to like force things, Like
Mhm.
if if I can't find a kind like something that I really like want to work with, I'm in the position owning my own place. I'm just not going to have. I don't have to get it.
Yeah.
As opposed to if you have a menu in place and you have to stick to that menu all the time, you can you can be a little bit forced just to stick to something, even if it's not an ingredient that you're really happy with.
Yeah.
So yeah, fish is like the hardest thing I think to do well.
Hmm.
Given
Why is
it's,
that? Why is that?
I think because the perishability of it. Like sometimes when my guys go out fishing, sometimes they come back with nothing.
Yeah.
So and that's just what it is, right? So it's it's probably I think it's the hardest thing to do well in a restaurant is to do fish well at a high level.
I agree with that on so many levels because I think that yes, the availability, the perishability, just the desire to take it beyond what it truly is, I think is something we see. Again, I'm speaking. You're in an operation. You're feeding guests. I'm kind of like teaching students, how to appropriately handle certain things. And one of the things I struggle with a lot is trying to express to students, when to stop, like when to stop pushing a dish, because at some point it goes too far. And I don't know if that's something you experience in your own training of your cooks, is like, if you have a cook who's coming in on Monday and they're like doing these ingredients, how do you coach them to know when to stop and when to keep going?
It's funny. That's like, I think I remember the first chef that I worked for saying the hardest thing when learning how to cook is knowing when to stop. And I think when you're younger, there may be the idea that more is better. And so in many ways, I think it's the opposite. And when I do a menu, I feel like I try to keep it somewhat minimal. Mm-hmm. So you can focus more on less things rather than there being like so many things going on that it's hard to focus on.
Yeah.
So
no, I agree.
Yeah. And as far as like, that's something that you can say, but I think people just have to kind of like learn that on their own, if you put something together and it just doesn't work, just being honest and being like, okay, this doesn't work. Let's try this. And then take it in another direction. And sometimes all you're doing is taking something away, taking away something that shouldn't be there,
Yeah, I do. And it's almost like both things can be true at the same time. Like you can have a dish on your menu that does have like layer after layer after layer, and it is more and more and more. It's very driving. And then you can also have a dish on your menu that is very simplistic and very basic, because the ingredient kind of drives the bus in that regard, And I look at duck as a great example. Like duck is one of those ingredients that can be both incredibly basic, but can also absorb a ton of things around it. And it really is what you want the guest experience to be. Like when they take that bite of food, what is their reaction? Do you want them to be thinking about all the nuances in that dish? Or do you want them to be like, holy shit, that's just really good duck? Can you talk a little bit about that and just like how you anticipate the guest need?
Yeah. Well, using duck as an example, I feel like I said, we do it a lot. There's like 2 or 3 different duck dishes on the menu right now. And like where I go with it is I usually, starting with it, there's generally a fruit component of some kind or an acidic component of some kind, whether it's like hibiscus or classically it would be orange or apple or, some kind of berry or something. And then it's like, it'll go, okay, what other ingredients go well with that? So what things go well with hibiscus? And then it'll go from there. And it all, like duck's just sort of like the canvas, and then the other things are on it,
I love that approach.
And going around it. But
no,
yeah, I just find it incredibly, incredibly versatile. Like you can just go so many different ways. And there's really classic things that are great. Like I worked for a French guy years ago, and he was very, very classic. So it's like when I do duck and turnips, I think of him, And so those traditional things are always there. Like for example, if you look at like a linea, for example, and you look at some of those dishes, the bones of a lot of his food is classic French. If you really look at it,
and you know why? Because that's where he was trained,
right? But you can, even though some of it is very experimental and it's very different and it's very avant-garde, like the bones of the ideas of a lot of his dishes are Thomas Keller. It's kind of interesting when you look at it, and it really, and good food makes sense, right? Like you can see a dish and be like, okay, I don't know where this is coming from, and it seems, I just don't get it. And other times you look at something like that and it's like, okay, I totally get where this is coming from.
It's like, I have to be real careful here, because I could go on like a 5-hour tangent about just how like the identity or the DNA of a chef kind of comes to be. And the Grant TK reference is really awesome. And I think that there are so many chefs in the world that have gone on to do great things, yourself included. It's like, that are inspired. Like your DNA is peppered with all these sort of like great mentors along the way. And, you know, they might not even know it, but like when you're making a dish, like when you give that little nod to that classic French chef, you know, that you mentioned, like that's exactly where I feel we need to be in the industry. We need to cut out all the negative stuff. We need to focus on just making sure people have the toolkit to go on and then experiment using what you've given them as a base. And I just, it's, you know, again, I can't count the amount of people that, you know, if you look at their food, you know, does go back to Keller or does go back to Charlie Trotter or like all these old iconic chefs who really did set the stage for what we know as American dining today.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
And you know, hopefully everyone has like a mentor in their life, you know, everyone has somebody that they can look back on and be like, oh yeah, that person really like gave me direction when I needed it, you know, and for me, that was Michael Schlau back a long time ago, or Pascal Lefray, the French guy I was talking about earlier. And inevitably you'll see their influence in your work in some way. And maybe most people won't even know it. You know, it's almost like, it's like, you know it when you're doing it. And it's just, I don't know, it's kind of nice to think about, even though I haven't spoken to either one of them in years, but they're still very, you know, very relevant in the day to day.
No, and like if you ever caught someone, and again, it's tough because those connections usually span so far that if you ever catch someone who experienced the mentor's food and then yours, and they make that connection and they talk to you about it, it's like such a cool conversation because now they understand like your brain and why this dish came to be, and that's like a level of diving into food that's, you know, probably unhealthy, but also really good, you know?
Yeah.
Well, anyway, Rick Allaire, this has been a fantastic conversation. I'm going to cut it off because I know you guys got a ton going on today. Thank you so much for the time. And if you're in the area, where can people find Metacom?
So we are at 322 Metacom Avenue in Warren, Rhode Island. Appropriately enough, it's pretty easy to remember. Yeah, we're closed Tuesdays and Wednesdays, open Thursday through Monday, and reservations can be made on Toast tables. And yeah, it's great to be back, and it's been a lot of fun.
And did you have a social media that they can follow if they want to see what you're cooking?
Yeah, we're on Instagram and Facebook right now.
Nice. So check out Metacom via social channels. Go to the Mystery Mondays if you can get a seat because it's so cool. Chef, thanks so much for taking the time.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
All right, bye.